Welcome everybody to Cycle Jerks Podcast, episode 111. Today, it's just the two amigos. We had a last minute cancellation.
There goes our downloads.
I know, right? It's over. But we have a lot of stuff we want to talk about. And so yeah, we're just gonna freestyle it. We're gonna cover Dave finally got done watching the Tour de France Unchained.
Right, late to the party, but it was worth every freaking second of it.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into that, and then we've got there's also a Cavendish documentary that was really interesting that we've both seen, and then we'll touch on what just happened this past weekend, the SBT Gravel event in Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Oh, right. And let's not forget our friend Ben's event,
Yes.
the Small Monsters Project. What an event that was! Holy shit, that was great.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Yeah. So what Dave's talking about is we had Ben Frederick on last episode, and we committed to doing this charity ride. And it started in San Francisco, and we went around the Paradise Loop, and then we finished at the sports basement where there was a presentation that we had to dip out on because it got kind of late. But yeah, it's good. The big turnout and good vibes, and yeah, it was lots of fun.
An incredible cause too. Great cause.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we got lost. There was a GPS failure, and we ended up making the most of it. But we started at the right spot and we finished at the right spot. So
we're back. We're back in order to be able to record.
Yeah,
there was a moment when I wasn't sure we were going to be here, but
yeah,
I also want to be clear too. In fairness, we weren't the only ones that got lost. There was a lot of people going around in circles in whatever town that was, going, we should go straight, we should go left. I'm saying U-turn. That was, but you know
yeah.
what? It didn't matter. The point was not making a making a rest stop or finishing a particular ride. It was the awareness for the Small Monsters Project and traumatic brain injuries. And I spoke to Dana that rode with us there, and she stayed for the presentation, said it was fantastic. So I
Great.
can't wait for him to post it so we get to see it. But props Ben and team, and we'll see you next time you do it.
Yeah. It should be pointed out, Dana suffered a traumatic brain injury herself. And so, yeah, that's good to get her feedback on it. And we should also mention that Ben had two primary helpers, Liz and Lizzie. So, team Lizzie, were helpful with all the signups and accommodations, and we had pizza and sodas and beer and pastries, all kinds of good stuff. So yeah, that was a good day. All right, let's get into this Tour de France Unchained, because to me, it may be the greatest cycling documentary of all time. And I'm super hopeful that it is something that is going to be an annual installment. Hopefully there's enough viewership that they can warrant coming back every year. But it's a team that films the very popular Netflix series on Formula One racing, and they did this on the Tour de France. And was it eight? It's been a while since I watched it.
So yeah, 8. I was, how do I pass time on this flight back east? And I thought, well, I'll just watch it. Well, I didn't know it was 8 episodes, so I only got 4 going, and then 4 coming back, and it was really hard once I got to my destination not to watch the other, not to watch the other 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a way! And it's so. Let me put it this way: it's so captivating that partway through the flight, I told Sue, and then she started downloading it when we made our connection, in Dallas. So she was watching it on the Dallas to San Fran leg. So she's hooked as well. So
Yeah.
the point being, as a hardcore, like, again, for the tour, just so that you know, like, how into the tour am I watched 5 hours of that live stream. I watched every stage, the 5 hours, because I had it on don't tell my boss, but I had it on at work, streaming, right? So I'm really into it. But I think the important thing is that if
You're
you're
a
not,
psychopath.
oh, I know.
You,
Well, I was sound like I was glued. I'm like this. I had it in the background, right? And if
uh-huh.
something happened, I could look up.
Right.
But the point, what I'm driving at, is I'm super into it, and I found it fascinating. And I think that if you're not into cycling, but just kind of on the fringe of what the tour is, you can learn about what goes on that. You learn how much of a team effort it is. You learn how much the logistics go into it. You learn what it takes, and fucking 21 days of riding. I mean, yeah, so you can see what it takes. I think you don't even have to be a hardcore person to enjoy it.
Yeah. That was the thing that I took away too. Was like, of course the cyclists are going to love it, but there's so much to it that you know, other people that are just curious even about what even is the Tour de France, that there's enough there. There's compelling backstories, interpersonal relationships that are happening. Obviously the dynamic in the teams, each team has its own dynamic, good and bad. We can kind of touch on that a little bit. And just the overall, the racing component. Obviously, there's a winner every stage, so you get to know these personnel. Like, one of my favorite, in retrospect, my favorite parts, especially after this year's tour, my favorite part was, Jasper Philipsen was kind of like this maligned character, and I mean, he
Yeah,
had all this talent, but but they called him Jasper the Disaster. And yeah,
yeah,
that's cute because it rhymes. But man, if you're a world tour pro and you're trying to establish yourself as a great, and you have a nickname of Jasper the Disaster, you know that doesn't feel good. And he even at one
yeah.
point he addressed it. He like talked. He's talking about it, and you could just say when he said it, you could just see that it kind of like was painful for him. And so this year, when it came to the sprint stages where he was winning, I was so excited for this guy. I have no, I don't know this guy, but because of that, how vulnerable he was in the documentary, he's the kind of guy that you root for. And then
Yeah.
just to see him come back and have the success that he had, it was just added something completely different to the tour if I hadn't watched it previously.
Well, it's interesting because part of the reason they call him that is like the guy would show up and he'd forgotten his shoes, right? Or he's
Yeah,
forgotten his helmet, right?
yeah.
So
But also he wasn't winning.
he wasn't winning. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he
yeah,
wasn't winning.
yeah,
But so yeah, so it was great to see him because rise to the occasion, especially with the added pressure of that. But it was interesting. We had the guys on a while back, the Best Buddies guys, right? And the guy that was part of when Best Buddies was sponsoring a pro team, right?
yeah.
And at one of the Best Buddies events, I spoke to one of the guys that was on the staff, of the team, and he's like, "Yeah, these guys are just racers." He goes, "My job is to make sure that they just have their shoes and their helmets and their sunglasses, like because that's, I mean, that's basically what he said he'd do. Like, you can't really teach these guys how to be better and faster, right? They're
Yeah.
already there." He goes, "My job is to make sure that they show up and have their equipment." And that was kind of the Continental team, and then you hear that in the on a pro team, and I'm just cracking up. But
Yeah, that was
so hey,
yeah. Well, I mean, they've got a lot on their plate. They're traveling. They've got their, post ride stuff, all the race. Yeah, that was one thing that was kind of cool. was the preparation, seeing the team talks prior to a stage, the different things that each team would focus on, and some of the breakdown of the detail. Even though a lot of these roads, these guys train on these roads, they've ridden these roads many times, but they're still very strategic about when and where and why. And but the thing that I work for Giant, and we do something really interesting with our aero testing. So in the world of aero testing, Cervelo, I think, was the first company that actually put a figure like a cyclist on top of an aero bike in a wind tunnel, and he was known as Foam Phil. So prior to that, everybody was just put the bike in the wind tunnel, and the wind. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, so it could be somebody else, but Cervelo was largely credited as being the Foam Fill was like the first version of a human form on top of a bike in a wind tunnel to check the effectiveness of the bike and what difference it makes with a person on it. Well, we took it a step further. And I say I had nothing to do with it, but Giant took it a step further, and they created a dynamic dummy. So I always call him Dynamic Dan, but it has articulating hips, knees, and ankles, and it pedals. And you could dial up the wattage to replicate a rider and the wattage while blowing wind through it and checking it all out to truly see the effectiveness of the aero and what the impact of a pedaling cyclist is on a bike at different wattages and different yaw angles and whatnot. And that form is based on this rider for Giant back in the day named Grisha Nierman. And so I'm watching the Tour de France Unchained, and they go to Jumbo Visma, and it's Grisha Nierman is the director sportif for Jumbo Visma. And I had no idea. I never even really.
No, really?
Yeah. I never even really seen him, or I didn't really know much about him as a racer. And and then there he was. And I think he of all the director sportifs, I really felt like he did I mean, obviously you've got the dream team, but that's not necessarily a layup. Trying to manage all those different egos and everything, but I thought he was really calm, cool, and collected, and I think the team largely reflected his demeanor and still does. You juxtapose that with Cannondale, the EF team, and Jonathan Vaughters. Jonathan, obviously got a storied history with the Tour de France and World Tour racing, but he was so I mean, he's just got a different style, and he was very like, look, if we don't do something, we're done. And like
he's definitely Eeyore.
Yes.
He's definitely Eeyore throughout that whole thing, right?
Yeah. And I got to think, as a racer, you don't want to think about that, right? That's the last thing that you care about. I mean, well, you care because you're getting paid and all that, but you should be focused on strategy. How are we going to do this together as a team? Not like, hey, if we don't do something, we're done. That's not what I mean, in my mind, I wouldn't respond to that very well. I'd be like, why is this guy dumping this on me? I'm racing. I'm just going to do the best I can. Management, you need to take care of that stuff so we don't have to worry about it. But I don't know. That's just was my takeaway. You look at the two different teams.
Yeah, I don't disagree, other than it's, when you've got a guy like, when you brought a guy like Rigoberto Urán, and he's supposed to be a GC guy, and he's not even, I mean, barely covered him, right? They say, oh, he's, the team captain and he's inspiring and all that, but at the end of the day, he's not producing any results.
Right.
And if they don't produce results, they don't get the points, and then they don't get sponsorships. And are you leaving?
Well, I
have to kiss my wife goodbye.
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Oh, hi, Sue. This is
It-
a first for Cycle Jerks podcast, that's for sure.
Because Cycle Jerks porn.
Oh,
we,
Josh.
we've got porn.
I have to like check some content boxes when I post these things. I mean, ay,
Uh,
ay, ay. Okay,
so
so
I know it's like I'd rather have the inspirational speech. Um, but then again, now maybe we're getting off on the whole thing, but it's so a guy. There's a guy completely unrelated. There's a local guy, Rick Lawton. Okay, he is the most prolific racer around here. He is at every race that is put on around here, and he's there every time.
yep.
And and he posted yesterday that he got fourth at the university road race,
Okay.
and he said, "My first podium ever." And my response was, "I don't believe that. I can't believe that. He's always there." And so you take that up to the pro level, right?
Yep.
You've got guys that have done their entire careers and they've never won,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so, but yet, like I was, like EF, like Nielsen Palace, Court. Like I'm loving, even though they're not winning, and even Iran. I'm not dogging on it, but I like watching these guys race. So, well, the likelihood that they're going to win is really slim.
It
But we
is.
need these as teams, and we need sponsors to back these teams. Almost win or lose, unfortunately, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and I mean, I do feel like it is right now, it's kind of a two-horse race, but the 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 level, like, yeah, there were some guys that this year's tour that won, and that was the first time they'd ever won a professional cycling event. And then you win a stage of the Tour de France. It's like, man, I mean, what is that? What must that feel like,
I know.
Yeah,
But
but
taking that back up. But so there you've got uh, Jonathan Vaughters saying that, right? But
yeah,
then what I found a fascinating story in there is the story about FDJ, right? I mean, when was the last time they had not won a stage in the tour since Pino did it in 2000? Was it 13? I'm making that number up. It was a long time ago.
long time ago. Yeah.
But Pino's still on that team,
Yeah.
right? And the sponsorship is FDJ has been a sponsor. So, that's and that their their director, the team manager, was so calm and cool. And I don't know. That's kind of what it was about. Why does FDJ stick around and sponsor these guys? And then, other sponsors change, like we change underwear. I mean,
Right.
it's just not all right. So I don't know
Yeah.
where I'm going with that, but
Well, it was interesting, like to your point about FDJ and then Grisha Nierman, juxtapose that with the director sportifs of Movistar that we've seen in the least expected day, right? You're talking just total chaos. They're
yeah,
yelling at each other. They're yelling at it's just like, yeah, it's just a different dynamic, each team. So you could kind of, I always kind of had this thing, if a rider moved from team to team, I always thought the rider might be a problem, you know, but you could see where, like, for me, if I was on EF and I got that speech right before the Tour de France, I'd be
uh,
thinking, I'm moving on next year. I'm not dealing with this crap. You know what I mean?
right,
So, but there certainly have been some writers that have earned their reputation of being difficult or divas. But it did really shine a light to me on just the different team dynamics and how certain people are not going to respond well to certain director sportifs.
okay,
I always felt like, I don't know about you, Dave, but when I prior to watching the least expected day, because that was my first real insight into team dynamics on the tour. There'd been some other, you read some stuff, but to see it, is just really way more impactful to me. And I don't know, the writers kind of have to put up with the leadership in a way in a lot of these situations. And I just always assumed that at that level, you're dealing with like the highest level, everything should be buttoned up and pro. And it's just so, it's some of the teams, the people are so scatterbrained, and they don't have good strategies, and they're yelling and screaming. It's like, where are the professionals in all this, you know?
Is it any different in corporate America though?
Yeah, no,
You
that's
know
a
what I
good
mean?
point. Right.
It's not any different, right?
That's a fair point for
Wow,
sure.
this company's really successful. Oh, I can't wait to go work there. What the fuck
Yeah.
have I got myself into?
Yeah, they're a complete mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess on a related note, so it's what Jasper's on
Yeah,
Alpecin,
Alpecin. Yeah.
right? So that main guy, one of the brothers that did most of the talking,
Okay.
doesn't he kind of reminds you of like the evil dude in Die Hard? like he's a bad guy. He's like, oh my god, I'm not sure I'd want to. To your point, I'm not sure I'd want to work for him. It's like I
Yeah.
just think he's like always he's the evil guy in all the bad movies, all the bad. It's like
Yeah.
holy god, oh my god,
Yeah. I
So,
think it's safe to say that we would both want to ride for Jumbo Visma.
yeah, yeah,
And never mind that everyone else probably too, because of the squad they have and the leadership.
yeah.
Um, but
So I
one,
bet
go
you're.
ahead.
I'm sorry. So your guy. It's funny that you say that. You saw that guy that was um, uh, the brains behind the aerodynamics of it. Well, I was watching it's Ineos team, and
Yeah.
one of their guys is Charlie Wagalius. I
Hmm.
think I'm pronouncing that right, and he wrote the book. If you've ever going to read the book Domestique, um, I think I've mentioned it on here before, but like the forward to this is like I've been a pro cyclist for 13 years. Um, I make lots of money. You've probably never heard of me, and I'm damn good at what I do. you know, and
That's
he was
cool.
the sport, yeah, and he was the sports director. So he wrote that book, Domestique, fantastic book. He's the sports director there. He's the actual guy that was the inspiration behind my tattoo. And when I saw his face and I saw him speaking for the first time, I'm like, holy shit. Like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So it was just
It's
apropos
pretty cool.
stuff.
Like you had a similar moment that I had with
Yeah,
Grisha, you know.
yeah,
It's just neat when these names kind of get brought to life. And you get to kind of have a better understanding of them through their
yeah.
actions and how they interact. But yeah, should be pointed out though, Grisha was not the brains behind the arrow.
Oh,
He was the body.
he's the
So
body.
they
Okay.
used his body, they used his exact form, his size, his weight, all his dimensions. That
Okay.
was what the dynamic dummy that we use in the arrow testing. But
Cool.
yeah,
Cool.
and one of the things there, Wout wasn't happy with the docu series, and he felt like he was portrayed in a bad light. I did not have that takeaway.
I
What are
didn't have
your
that takeaway at all.
Yeah,
No.
I think he was
He
conflicted.
he as any team would be, right?
Yep.
Here's a guy that can win stages, and um he absolutely went against team orders the first time,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
The second time he started to, I think, and then all of a sudden he goes, I'm not making that mistake again.
Yep.
And then the other time when he was on that climb and he just shattered the field and dropped Pagacha, like
Yeah.
I thought, no, you looked at him and of course when you have that many stars, there's going to be conflicts and there's going to be these things. And I thought he rose to the occasion. I was going to say he is the consummate team player. I'm sorry he walked away with that feeling.
Yeah,
So
he did leave his race leader. And you know, it's so hard. I could, I mean, he just wants to win, you know, and the day where he shattered the field, he shattered Pagasha. To me, that's a great team tactic, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you, yeah, anyway, so I don't know. Yeah, I didn't agree with that. I think, you know, everyone that rides a bike, you know, even on your little group ride, you know, sometimes somebody's having a bad day and, you know, you make the choice. You either go back or you just keep going. And so
Yeah.
we've all been in a similar situation, nowhere near the stakes but yeah, I didn't fault him at all when he took it and ran with it that one
Yeah.
stage, because I don't think in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that's going to make or break the race. But I
They're,
do,
they're,
I do
they're,
understand though the
yeah.
team and the relationship with the race leader or the team leader, whatever you want to call him. That's
Mhm.
super important. And if he doesn't feel like you're working in his best interest, that could really cause a wedge. And I think if you look at the way that Wout handled this year, pre-tour, he just said, I'm not interested in the green jersey,
Mm.
you know? And so I think that maybe, you know, to your point, being a good teammate and everything, I think that he probably wanted to, in his mind, redeem himself, although he doesn't need to redeem anything.
Think so.
Yeah,
I,
but
th- I think that,
he did ride a much more team-centric race this year.
yeah. And listen, listen to us, like we're ever going to be in the car or on the team bus giving the speech. But, when you go back to the U.S. Postal Service, right?
Yeah,
There was no question about it. There's no
yeah,
question about it. Lance was the guy. Everyone's
yeah,
riding for Lance. Now, when you have these, we're going into the thing, we're going in with the co-captains and all this. You can't, you have to expect that that's going to happen, right? And if
yeah,
you take a case like Jumbo Visma, if ever you had a race where you've got Vingegaard, Roglic, and Van Aert in there, that's going to happen. The team has set that up. You can't have three stars at that level and then expect at all time that they're going to play a certain role. They're going to make decisions as they go. So I don't know. I don't view. Wow. I walked away like, yeah, okay, he made a move, but throughout the rest of the thing, I never saw anywhere like it. It didn't create a movie star type environment.
yeah, yeah.
And there was even one line there which I cracked up when he goes when they were on it and they were talking about the tactics and Vingegaard said something like, "Yeah, just be careful because I don't want to go into the red." And da, da, da. Van Aert looks at him and goes, "I could never put you in the red." It was one right.
Yeah,
So you could tell it wasn't, and I got to repeat myself, but yes, there was some conflicts, there were some uh, self interest that people had, but there was never, I don't sense any kind of that Movistar dynamic where it's like there's any confusion over why we're really here and
yeah.
who's really in charge. So,
Well, yeah, it is confusing. Like I never liked the idea of co-captain. To me, come on, you can't be
yeah,
half pregnant. You got to pick a leader, and that. But in the case with Roglic, you could understand it, you could understand the need for a co-captain because
yeah,
this guy has just had horrific luck. I don't know if you could pin it on him as like maybe he's poorly skilled or he makes poor decisions, but whatever it is, this dude has a hard time getting through anything without crashing.
yeah,
And so but he's got crazy talent. Um, but at the same time, I mean, I just think as a team, you just gotta go with, in this case, Vinegar. I mean, he's proven himself for the
yeah,
last, what is it? It's been several years now where
yeah,
him and Pagasha are 1-2 or 2-1.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, go
there's a
ahead.
there's a dark side of this because I want to make sure it's clear, right? What I found fascinating about this thing is that yes, there was a lot of emphasis on Jumbo Visma, but it wasn't about that. They gave you pretty good insights into almost every team, right?
Yeah.
So every team's got some kind of airtime, and that's what I thought was incredible about it. It was pretty well balanced.
Yes.
Um, but and this probably will be a little bit controversial, but I relate it to what we were just talking about when we opened the show about um, the Small Monsters Project, right?
Yeah.
You get a concussion, right? And so you think, oh, I just got to power through. And in football and baseball, something happens, and the coaches are always like, you just got to power through, right? And then, I think as we learn more, it's not the right thing to do. But was it Ben O'Connor whose muscle was basically ripped off of his
Yeah.
and he's laying there. That his muscle is ripped off of whatever it is, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, you got to give us one more day." And
One
he's
more
like,
day.
like he's in his room packing his bag, getting his massage, and they're like, "Yeah, no, we need you there tomorrow." And it's like,
Uh,
and you could tell he's like, the look on his face, like, "Oh, this is going to be fun,"
yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
God bless the guy. He went out and but should at any level should we be doing that shit? That's insane.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
insane.
muscle, like Ben made a great point the last podcast about, you break your arm, you break your whatever, you tear your ACL. There's like a full protocol, you
Yeah.
do this, and this, and you're back. But with your head, it's a lot different dynamic. But while we're on the subject of Small Monsters Project and Ben, how rad is it that Ben actually lines up and race against Wout Van Aert? Can you
Yeah.
imagine, like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, he's accomplished, and he deserves to be there and everything, but can you imagine, like, oh wow, Wout's on
Okay.
the starting line?
Yeah. And so, oh, and by the way, so is MVP.
Yeah, right.
All right. All right. And, to just look around and go, all right, guys, we're racing for third.
I was gonna say, what's the mentality at that point? Is it we're racing for third, or today's the day I'm gonna I'm gonna let the world know? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hopefully you have that latter mindset,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah, very cool.
and I'm sure that happens, right? What did Nikki say the other day on last week's podcast, right? I'm
Yeah.
sitting there going, and he said, I'm sitting there going, yeah, if I don't blow this, I'm going to get third. And then all of a sudden, at some point, he said, no, I'm going to win this thing. And he just,
Right.
it was boom, boom, boom. And that's the way I think they have to line up. It's like, okay, and that's got to be the way every pro lines up at that thing. They got to go, okay, well, there's Vindegaard, there's Pagacha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
They're gonna learn today.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully. I mean, it goes that way, but
yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, but no, it was amazing that when he was with that I when Ben said that, we knew he was elite, we knew he was pro. But when he said that, I was originally thinking, yeah, okay, around New England, he's doing all the races, but there he is in Europe racing against the big boys.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. Okay, let's close the book on the Tour de France Unchained. I mean, I think we've said everything we need to say about it. And if you haven't seen it already, please just check it out. It's incredible. And then let's shift gears and talk about the
Uh,
Cavendish. Oh, do you have something you want
well,
to add?
yeah, yeah. Just the one last thing. I just look. This is not an appeal. Obviously, no one's going to listen to me, but I just want to emphasize how cool. I think it's indicative of the difference of European mentality towards cycling versus the U.S. mentality towards cycling,
Mm-hmm.
right? So FDJ has not had a Tour de France stage win since whatever 2013.
Yep.
Here's Jonathan Vaughters shitting his pants that if we don't get points, we're going to lose our sponsorship. And to that end, the EF women's team folded this over the weekend, right?
Yep.
So, you know, and I'm pretty sure that like some of the European pro teams aren't going to be folding that way, right? I mean, they're going to have the Jumbo Visma
Yep.
team. I know they're looking for a sponsor as well, but it's just an unfortunate. I don't know. Whatever. I'm done with it. But it was really sad to see that team fold because there's some talented women on that, and it's hard enough, I think, because women's tour and everything else, it doesn't get as much airtime, and it's just as exciting to watch. So
Yeah. Well, who knows that, I could see where you can make a case where a documentary on the women's tour could be even more compelling because of
yeah,
all the hurdles, and you don't really know those names over there like you do on the men's side.
right, right,
Certainly there's some prolific women that are, now building thanks to the fact that they're televising it, they're running the races, they've got the Roubaix, they've got the Tour, the Giro. So yeah, I mean, that could be interesting just because it's kind of in its infancy almost,
yeah.
so it could be a different thing, but who knows if they'll do it or not. But
But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Cavendish.
yeah. This just in:
So
Americans do not care about cycling like the Europeans.
yeah,
Noted. Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Okay. Okay. So let's get into Cavendish. So the Cavendish doc, I really liked it. Even though I've never been a huge fan of Mark Cavendish. And there's no denying his skill and his athleticism, his ability to win races. Like we were talking about with Nikki, everybody's at the end. Who's got it at the end? It's mental. He's got it. He has the
Yeah.
mental, and obviously 34 World Tour wins, or Tour de France stage wins. But he's done some stuff in his career that I don't agree with, and I don't like. And I think I've really put sportsmanship. I think sportsmanship is something that's super important, and especially when you're an athlete at his level, because it carries more weight. And I just feel like he's kind of behaved in a way where it's just like, oh God, Mark, come on, dude, take
So
the high road.
like like what though? What because
Oh, well, I mean, there's been so many incidents. I don't know if you ever seen that that footage of him on the track where he just gets right alongside some guy, and the guys, they're just kind of like, and then he just looks right at him, and he's up on the high side, and he just takes the dude out.
hmm,
He looked
yeah,
right at him and just like swerved right into him, and then the guy just fell down, and that was it. And
hmm,
it's like, I mean, it's one thing to be a competitive racer, but he also makes some really risky choices. Now, you could also say, hey, that's what makes him great. And I'm sure that's a big part of why he's able to win when others can't push through like he did. That he is willing to put it all out there on the line. And I respect that. And the other thing where made me kind of turn the corner with him a little bit was he didn't have a spot on a team. And then he raised money to, like, he bet on himself. And to
yeah,
me, that was the coolest thing in his career, in my mind. Would take all the wins, everything, but he was just like, hey, you don't believe in me? I'll put the money up. I get me a spot on this team and I'll show you. And
yeah,
I love that, so
yeah.
he's a complex person. And the doc covers his bouts with depression and some of these other things.
Eating disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, it's so wild, this eating disorder thing in cycling. That's something that's really been surprising since we started doing this podcast. I don't know
Yeah,
about
yeah.
you. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, well, I mean, how can it? I mean, how can it not be? I mean, it is not. I don't. It is not normal that these guys would be at 130, 135 pounds, right? And so, on some level, there there's some kind of obsessive obsession with the food and intake and then any time that it is, and any time that you're struggling to get down to that, you know that you're doing it for a reason, but it's not normal, and therefore it's some form of a disorder.
Got it. Got it.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe that's that's very unscientific. and maybe that's indicative of the whole thing about the injury thing. Like, we're forcing him to push through this. It's like if we would all just collectively agree that 135 is not normal, so let him race at 155, then it'd be a level playing field, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And it just has got to be crazy what these guys must. What one of the guys in the other documentary said, so what are you going to do now? He goes, I'm going to go home and eat chicken, like chicken and rice, like I do every after every race. You know, it's like, oh, right.
Yeah.
So
That made me feel
uh,
good because I do eat a lot of chicken and rice. I was
I
like,
know.
okay, so maybe I'm not an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm
But
still an
my
idiot.
Yeah, but again, my so a couple things back to Cavendish.
Yeah.
Again, if you're not into cycling, okay, I didn't even know about this one, and my daughter calls me and is like, "Did you do watch the tour Unchained?" And I'm like, "No," and she goes, "Don't even bother. Go to the Cavendish one. You're gonna love this one." So this
Oh,
again,
wow.
yeah. So this is it appeals. I mean, she's kind of into the cycling thing because of me, but it appeals to that because this one isn't so much about the tactics, so much
Yeah.
about the emotion and the ups and downs of what this guy's gone through, the pressure, right? You
Yeah.
talked about the pressure with lining up, like he said, he goes, I wasn't the one talking about beating Mark's record. You guys are the one that brought it up. He goes, and
Yeah.
now they're talking about it. And, suddenly it's like you guys say, making it sound like it was my goal. He goes, you're the ones that brought it up.
Right.
So, um,
The
but
thing that stands out to me most about that documentary was his wife, the relationship with his wife, and how she, in sickness and in health, you make that vow. And she stood by him when rightfully she didn't have to, but she did.
yeah,
And yeah,
I've often wondered
she's
why
very
Sue has
strong.
put up. I've often wondered why Sue puts up with my shit around cycling.
Ah,
But now, my God, right? I mean, this guy just, he just wasn't even there. He's got
yep,
kids. And
right.
so,
I can't imagine. Yeah, she's the MVP of the doc for sure.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
and their marriage too. I mean, he's a breadwinner for sure. I'm sure they make a lot of money. He makes a ton of money, and they've lived very well. But man, you need your soulmate. You need that
yeah,
person by your side, and she's raising kids, and man, it was just impressive to see her commitment to their relationship given the circumstances that they were in. And
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I
Uh,
I I really that doc though really did kind of make me understand him a lot more. And a lot of my feelings about him changed. They changed when he invested in himself. That was something that I really respected. And then you get this backstory of what he's gone through and everything. So I've always respected him, of course, because he just had some crazy talent, and he's a winner.
all
But
right.
yeah,
So for me, there's a couple things. First of all, I I've never disliked him. I know that and I've seen certain things in certain sprints when he takes risky moves and is taking people out, but uh, but I've also so I always liked him. It wasn't necessarily my hero. The
yeah,
minute, but for me, when it turned, it was not when he invested in himself, but it was the minute that people started saying, was suddenly when he was the underdog, then I'm rooting for him because what drives me nuts is when they are all start saying, he's finished and he shouldn't be there and all that, and all of a sudden, what's lost is all that he's accomplished. You know what I
yes,
mean? And it's like, okay, and there's a point at which everyone has to give up, but
yep,
suddenly it's like, and you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. Like, there you go, Epstein Barr, right?
yeah,
The thing he should have done is stopped, and the thing he kept doing was trying harder.
yep,
He should have rested, and boom, it's not like the concussion protocol. Take 28 days off, right? And then you're,
Yeah.
Another thing though, which is I think in very telling is, and I didn't cover it that much, but it probably very much related to the eating disorder, is they did hint at how obsessive he is about certain things, right?
Yes.
And he's absolutely maniacal about, and you could see him checking over his bike position, and all that. And those people like to be in control, and then eating thing is one of those things of control, right? One of the things you can control.
Yeah. Yeah. You wonder, how pervasive it is with everybody.
Yeah,
It's like I said, it's just been, like I said, maybe I'm an idiot, but I just never thought, I always think of fuel, you got to fuel, you got to get yourself the proper fuel, not starve yourself.
yeah,
Uh, but, um, I remember at the end of this year's tour, I was watching it and there's one, like Vinigo had his shirt off and my wife just happened to be, she doesn't pay too much attention. She's like, good God, who's that? I
yeah,
go, that's the tour winner. She's like, he is just a rack of bones. He looks
yeah,
terrible. That's so unhealthy.
yeah,
And I'm like, well, I don't know if unhealthy is the right word.
yeah,
He just won a 21 stage
yeah,
world tour race. But I wonder how, like somebody that like Vinigo and Pagasha, obviously the two on top of the sport, and they are rail thin. But you wonder how much weight do they lose during the tour,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because how could you possibly uh, get enough calories in? Um,
Oh, yeah,
yeah, so you're probably losing weight every single day. There's some sort of attrition that's becomes a part of it. But
yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. So at the end of it all, the Cavendish stuff, I do, the other thing that kind of like maybe another thing that kind of bugged me when they started all this Eddie Merckx stuff. It's like, you know what? Eddie Merckx did it all.
Yeah,
This guy's a specialist. And granted, you can't compare eras, but to me, like no one questions Eddie Merckx and his overall ability. I mean, the guy was, it's one of the all-time greats. And so is Cavendish though. But he did it in a completely different way.
he's the yeah.
Yeah. So,
So I mean, he's won road races. He doesn't just won sprints, right? And then
yeah.
is what he's done. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
um,
yeah,
but
I
when
turned the
another,
corner. Now I'm
uh,
a Cavendish fan now that he's retired.
I is he though?
I know. You don't know.
Is he though?
Kind of left the
Uh,
door open.
um, One thing I will say where I've always sort of where I disagree a little bit, because I know that again a prickly personality for sure.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've always noticed about Cavendish at the end of his victories, he is one of the first guys he just goes in search of all his teammates, right? So yeah, he's a
Yeah.
difficult personality, but there's no question he's in search of his teammates and thanking them,
Yeah.
for what they've done. And I'm not saying, I go back to the days of HTC when Hincapie was, on the team and all that.
Yeah.
And it's always in my recollection, it's always been that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'd agree with that. Yeah. My issue with him was really more about some of the tactical stuff that he's done, some of the crashes that have been
yeah.
caused
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
whatnot. But
Hey, so can we backtrack to the Unchained thing?
yeah.
Because you just the crashes. Two things that I want to cover, which I forgot. One of the guys who I enjoyed listening to most, and I loved his perspective, was Garrett Thomas.
Yes.
I
Agreed.
thought well, first of all, for this guy to produce at the level at which he did against those guys, but also, yeah, just his perspective and insights into the race and the tactics and what it takes, and accepting his aging, and them questioning whether he's the guy for today or should they let Pitcock go.
Right.
that was great.
Yep.
But before I get off of that, is the crash. I don't think we talked you because you mentioned the crashes and shit.
Yeah.
I don't think we gave enough credit. We talked about Jasper, but Fabio Jakobsen,
Yes. Oh
hit,
man.
uh, wow,
Yeah.
wow,
It's amazing that he's back. Uh yeah, anybody that saw that thought he might be dead.
yeah,
It certainly looked like no question career ender. Um and the fact that he made it back and in a significant way. And
yeah,
yeah, it was real. That's
and
yeah, you're right. We really missed that story when we were talking about it. That's yeah, really incredible.
and the candor which he talked about it,
Yes.
like, and for me, I'm thinking, okay, it's enough to line back to get back to the start line
Yeah.
and then get into another one of those sprints,
Uh,
right? But
right.
some people would probably block it out of your head. This guy's candidly talking about it,
Yep.
and you can see the scars,
Right.
and he's just like, yeah, here I am again. And then he goes and he wins,
I
right?
know. It's
So
incredible.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't really know, I think a lot of us, you don't really know what you're made of, until something like that happens. Um, Yeah, I did. I got involved in helping a friend of mine. I've talked about this before, but we put on these races for this racer friend of mine that suffered a spinal cord injury. Her name's Tara Yanis, and she's in a wheelchair to this day. And but it's interesting, like her mind is so strong. That's the thing that she's an amazing athlete, but like her mind was so strong. And she even said, I I didn't know that I had this in me. And I think that's probably a lot of people where you just don't know until you're faced at intense adversity. Hopefully you never do, you know.
Right.
Um, but to talk to Tara, she would tell you she wouldn't change a thing. She
Yeah.
believes, that she's right where she's supposed to be right now and doing what she's supposed to be
Wow.
doing. And yeah, it's really powerful stuff. And yeah, so to see that, to see him and listen to his, I kept thinking about my experience with Tara and some of the talks that I've had with her. And yeah, but I would hope it's in all of us, but maybe not. A lot of people, you hear these stories where somebody has something like that happens, and then it just goes into a dark depression and sometimes
Right.
results
Right.
in the worst possible outcome.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it was incredible to see him back and on top. It was just like, man, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a guy
Yeah.
you root for. So
Yeah.
Fabio and Jasper, the disaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's try to get through let's see if we can get through the rest of this podcast without getting back to that Unchained, but that should tell everybody just how awesome it is. But okay, so let's wrap this thing up with some the SBT Gravel.
Some shout outs yeah, shout outs to some of our former guests and friends. So yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
For,
Yeah. Steamboat
for
Springs.
those of you that don't, yeah, give the background of what it
Yeah.
is. So
I don't know if I'm
our
capable, but it's Steamboat Springs, Colorado. It's a huge event. Um, there's it's kind of like a bucket list type of thing for a lot of people. I haven't done it. Dave, you haven't done it.
Yeah, no, it's lottery only.
Yep,
Yeah, it's a lottery to get in, so you really gotta sign up early and pray.
yep.
Although I have a pro tip for getting in. Um, but yeah,
Let's
it's
hear
from
it.
what so well, let me give the background first. But for those of you, and I don't know because I haven't done it, but a friend has done it and said from a gravel perspective, it's one of the, like as you said, bucket list things. Like you've got to do it, right?
Yep,
The town of Steamboat, where it's held. The trail itself, they talk about the gravel being just amazing, amazing riding. The town and the whole vibe around this thing, it's like you got to go do it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
definitely on my list. Now, the feedback I've gotten, was hard, which is, and in part because you're at altitude, right?
Yep.
Um, but anyways, before we get into the shout outs for our friends, the one of our friends who, well, I'll just go ahead. Jenny, she was never been on our podcast, but any one of the local riders, everyone knows Jenny. Former, I don't know if she was a state champ or former, at least NorCal champ. So she's the real deal. Has rides a lot, but is really taken to gravel. She got second in her age group, but she got in because they formed a team. So there were more slots for teams than there were openings for teams than there were for individuals. So brace yourself. Her team was her and her boyfriend. Not
There you
like it was
go.
30 people. They just said, okay, we're a team.
All right.
And they got in,
Well, let's
even
be a
though,
team next year, Dave.
yeah, super.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Team
So,
cycle jerks.
yeah, there we go.
Well, I this morning I wake up, I look at the Instagram feed and I follow Reggie Miller, obviously NBA Hall of Famer, one of the all-time great shooters in basketball history, and a very avid cyclist. He does a lot of racing and he did it this year.
Oh, I did not know that.
And
Okay.
as you might imagine, he's in incredible shape. He was always in incredible shape as a basketball player, and cycling has become a big part of his life. And he's rail thin, rides all the time, just got, working with coaches, everything. He's into it. And about I think it was 55 miles in, he started cramping. And so the elevation definitely adds a very tricky wrinkle to the whole proposition. The course itself seems like it's pretty hard in general without the elevation, right? I think it's
Right.
10,000 feet. It's 100 miles and 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
So that's not an easy day on the bike. And he finished in 9 hours. Um, so,
Finished. Yeah.
oh no, excuse me. He finished at 6:55.
Oh,
Yeah, his chip time was 6:55. So that gives you an idea the kind of shape he's in.
yeah.
That's a good time, but even with cramping about halfway through. And I don't know if you've ever done an event where you started experiencing cramping and you're trying to race. This happened to me. I was with Claire at the Everybody Loves Raymond gravel grinder. And Claire gets alongside of me. She's like, "What's the matter with you?" I'm like, I can't pedal. Every stroke, my leg cramps. And she's like, okay,
Yeah. Um,
So I could sympathize with Reggie and probably lots of other people that were on that course. And I can't help but think about the dad bod McKessie out there, you know?
yeah. 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 No, so this is not, obviously I want to get onto that, but I'm not prone to cramping. Like I could think of the Modesto road race one time, a long, long time ago, when I felt like a cramp coming on, and I've been racing since whatever early 2000s or 2010 or whatever, just never experienced it. And then the Belgian waffle ride, I'm clipping along going, I got this. We're at mile 80. This is no
Uh-huh.
problem. I started cramping and it never went away. And just,
Yeah.
you're pedaling and there's absolutely nothing you can do because you're beyond that point, right? You're beyond, and it just was like, is it happening when I stand up? Maybe if I sit down, if I'm downhill, uphill, it just was the most miserable experience of my life. You know,
Yeah.
I I,
Yeah.
I pulled into a rest stop, and they two volunteers had to come over and grab my bike and help me off so that because otherwise I would have tipped over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah. If you've never been pushed to that point,
yeah.
It's unlike anything else. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, what kind of fitness you're in. You're on a ride and you have no control. It's really brutal. So I sympathize with Reggie, and I'm sure many others. But how about Flavia?
But yes,
Our former guest, local gal, Flavia Oliveira. She transitioned from road to gravel. She had a prolific road career. And she is
7th
just
in the
crushing
Olympics.
it. Yeah, she was just crushing it on gravel. And the thing I love about Flavia's a party. She is just a party. She is so fun to be around. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yep.
She's got this incredible spirit. And let's face it, the women's category has been, it's a subject of controversy because there's biological males. I cringe as I say this, even because I don't want to start a bunch of vitriol, but and that's been this whole source of a lot of controversy. And Flavia, even though it impacts her directly, she's managed to stay out of the fray. She's always shining light on what's positive about women's racing. And I got so much love for her, and it's just good
Yep.
to see her continue to rattle off these podiums.
Yeah. Got
Every
third. She got
yeah,
third.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
yeah, third. And it's just so consistent. It's just so consistent with her, whether it's Unbound or SBT or whatever other event she's doing. She's always in the hunt. So it's
yeah,
great to see that. So
yeah,
congratulations, Flavia. And then our man Dennis,
yeah.
uh, Dennis Warren. I think I just dropped my phone, so I can't see, but I think he was 24th overall,
I think you're
something
right.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, out of
yep.
960 people.
And
So
if you're not familiar with Dennis or Flavia, we should point out, like, you can follow Flavia on Instagram. She's at Lil Crush, LILCRUSH, and Dennis is at Sac Dempa, SAKDEMPA. Both of them are fantastic follows, great content, and so if you're interested in sprucing up your feed at all, there's a couple good ones for you.
yeah, they're great. They're great to follow.
Yeah,
And then then what we don't know, unless you've got an update, because I said I dropped my phone, it's down there. But our man Mikasi, dad bod cyclist, 220-pounder, had never been on a gravel bike. You want to talk about a spirit? So you mentioned Flavia, but this is the guy that, man, oh man, oh man, oh man, what a positive outlook on life that this guy has, who took up cycling.
yep,
Uh, all about inclusion, had never done gravel, and he gets a call from Ride for Racial Justice to go out and do this thing. And so, never done gravel. They lend him a gravel bike, and he goes and chooses his first gravel bike to be one of the hardest gravel rides ever. So I'm dying to get an update on how he did.
well, I just fired up his feed real quick, and there's a clip of him finishing. So he did it.
Oh,
He finished, and
awesome.
yeah, pretty amazing. But yeah, we're gonna have him back on because you know we got to hear the story.
Yeah,
uh, yeah. So yeah, he's a guy super easy to root for. And it's funny, his thing's called dad bod cycling. It should be called linebacker bod cycling, because he may have had a dad bod when he started, but man, this guy, he's transformed himself. And it does have that, I think he said he played Division I college football. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's
And it's funny that you say that though, because like as stoked as we are about Dennis or Flavia, it's,
yeah,
well, yeah, of course, that's what we expected, right?
yeah,
So their story, coming in third, their story wouldn't be nearly as exciting as Dad Bod Cycling and finishing this friggin' thing. So we've
yeah,
definitely got to have him back on.
yeah, pretty incredible. So we'll look forward to that. I don't have he's not on the schedule yet, but I'm going to reach out. We'll get him in there probably
Yeah.
sometime in October, I'd imagine.
Well,
All right.
And if
Yes.
for nothing else, he did it for all the right reasons. Ride for Racial Justice was just about getting more people of color on bikes, and that's why he was doing it. So, he's riding a bike for all the right reasons, right?
Yes, definitely. And it's so good to see more diversity in the sport of cycling, and all taking all types of shapes, sizes, colors, ethnicities. The more people we can get into it, the better it is for everybody. And yeah, it's just neat to see how everybody brings their own flavor to it too, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
All right, you got anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I got to go get another Diet Pepsi and start to get some work done. So,
You are such a sick puppy. I will say I picked him up at 6:30, 6:15 in the morning, we'll say, for the ride we did for the Small Monsters project, and he had 3 Diet Pepsis in him. He had a Diet Pepsi on him when he got in the car. I'm like, dude, already? He's like, oh, this is my 3rd one.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, oh my God.
And that's why it's like, Mike, step on it because I'm gonna have to pee before we get there. So,
Have you ever tried putting like a nail in a can of Coke?
no, 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 don't try.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
No, I digress, but every time I'm over at one friend's house, she used to be in the army, and she goes, we used to pour the Coke over the battery to get the rust off the batteries of their Humvees.
Yeah.
All right, pass me another one. So,
Right? Yeah, I was watching, there's like a little TikTok video made its way onto Instagram, and it was like all these things that people do with Coke. Like they clean their toilets with Coke. Like if you got that staining or whatever from an old toilet or something in a urinal, you just hit it with a Coke.
why my house sparkles, Mike?
That's it. Okay. Yeah. House cleaning tips here on Cycle Jerks
Yeah,
podcast. All right.
yeah, I'll take.
Don't drink Coke if you're out there. Diet Coke. It's a
Yes,
bad idea.
yeah,
Yeah. Water
yeah.
is a really good thing to be drinking. All right. On that note, let's wrap it up. Thanks, Dave. Always a pleasure. And thanks for listening, everybody. Oh, let's cover the subscription thing. So we have on Cycle Jerks podcast.buzzsprout.com. You can become a subscriber, and we have 2 dedicated subscribers, and we appreciate
You got to start somewhere. Way to
Ken
go, David.
Lunsford.
Said,
Ken
yeah,
Lunsford is number 1, and David Sutton number 2. So we appreciate you guys, and we appreciate the support. Subscriber or not, we love putting these things together, and we appreciate all of you following along. So that's it. Thanks, everybody.
peace,
Yeah. See
peace.
ya.